A delegation from Russia has arrived in Saudi Arabia for talks with the U.S. on a potential ceasefire in Ukraine. Ukrainian officials met their U.S. counterparts in Riyadh on Sunday. Ukraine's defense minister called the discussions constructive and meaningful. U.S. officials say they hope a temporary ceasefire can turn into a lasting peace deal. Well, we have correspondents in both Moscow and Kyiv. Let's go to Yulia Shapovalova in the Russian capital first. So, Yulia, this Russian delegation in Saudi Arabia, what are they hoping for during this conference? What are Russia's aspirations here?
Well, you're absolutely right. Representatives of the United States are meeting with a delegation from Russia. The meeting has already begun. We know that President Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, earlier said that the United States' goal was actually organizing some sort of indirect negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, something is Russia pretty much interested in as well. But today, no Russian-Ukrainian contacts are planned, just between Russia and the United States. And if everything goes well today, these so-called indirect Russia-Ukraine talks will be held tomorrow on March the 25th. If everything goes well, these would be the first peace talks between Russia and Ukraine since the spring of 2022. What the indirect talks mean, the Russia and Ukraine delegations will sit in neighboring rooms, and the U.S. mediators will join them in those rooms, trying to fulfill some sort of a shuttle diplomacy, speaking separately with the Ukrainians and Russians and back. The main topics of this round of negotiations are expected to be a 30-day rejection of strikes on energy facilities in both countries. The Russian side, well, actually both sides are blaming each other for breaking that agreement, which was reached more than a week ago between President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump. And also what is going to be negotiated is the cessation of hostilities at the Black Sea. So the Russian delegation at the negotiations with the US will be headed by senior diplomat and member of the Federation Council, Georgy Karasin, and advisor to the head of the FSB General Sergei Beseda, who allegedly convinced Vladimir Putin to launch Russia's special military operation against Ukraine back in 2022, saying that allegedly the Ukrainians would be very glad to live under the Russian rule, while Karasin is considered a political heavyweight. For many years, he worked as the Deputy Minister of the Foreign Affairs of Russia.
Yulia, thank you for that. Yulia Shapovalova in Moscow. Let's head to Kyiv now. Assed Baig is there for us. Assed, what are the expectations on the Ukrainian side?
Well, the expectations are that they're hoping for a ceasefire. But if I take you back to the talks that were held earlier this month, Ukraine went into those talks proposing a air and sea ceasefire. They left those talks agreeing to a complete ceasefire across the entire front line. But following that phone call between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, what was on the table was this partial ceasefire, if you want to call it that. That would mean not targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure and civilian infrastructure. Now, there are suggestions that that hasn't been implemented, that either side or both sides are blaming each other, that they haven't stuck to that. But even calling it a partial ceasefire is a bit of a stretch. The fighting continues, the shelling, the drones, the missile strikes continue. But what we do know is that the Minister of Defense, Rustem Umerov, is there, and he earlier just said that discussions were productive and focused, and they addressed key points including energy. And President Zelenskyy has said that this time the talks are more at a technical level with military diplomats and representatives from the Ministry of Energy. So really the Ukrainians are keeping very quiet about these talks taking place in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you for that, Assed. Assed Baig in Kyiv.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.